Hello everybody, this is Hammer Striker here. Today we've got a Ruger Mark II 22LR on the table, and we do have a full review video on this gun, but today's video is going to actually be about cleaning, disassembling, reassembling this gun. The disassembly and cleaning is pretty straightforward, it's fairly easy to do, but these guns have a reputation of being very miserable to reassemble. I've talked to a couple gunsmiths and they sometimes get these back as a bag of gun. You know, the owner couldn't get them back together and functioning. And really there's a few tricks to it. If you know the tricks, it's actually quite easy to reassemble these things, and unfortunately I'm sure a lot of them end up abandoned in pawn shops or sitting at the bottom of the safe because the owner tried a few times to put them back together and was unsuccessful and just kind of gave up on it. This one was actually loaned to us by a local viewer, and he doesn't shoot it very often for that very reason. But I bet you wouldn't believe me if I told you it can be reassembled, the action can be reassembled in 16 seconds flat. Kind of like this. Okay, now that you've seen it done, let me show you how to do it yourself. And there's a few tricks that I'm going to show you that will make it actually quite easy to do. I've looked at the owner's manual. I won't say it's wrong, but it was written by somebody that had a perfectly new gun in perfect condition, perfectly oiled in a perfect lab. And that's not the real world. So I'm going to show you how to do it with your gun, just the way it is. So I'm going to start out with having verify that it's unloaded, make sure it's in the fire position, and pull the trigger. Now that's unusual in a 22LR. You don't normally pull the trigger on a 22LR. But on these you have to, because you have to take the tension off of the mainspring. The next step is, this is the mainspring housing back here. And this lever, right here, we're going to lift it back away from the back of the gun down this way. And that's going to release the mainspring housing so it can swivel out. And if you look right here, you're going to see that there's a, kind of a recess that you can get up under it. And there's a little ledge on it. You can either pull it out with a pick, you can pull it out with a paper cup, like a paper clip, either rubber coated or plastic paper clip, or I'm going to use one of these picks with a blunt end. Don't use a screwdriver unless you want to scratch up your gun, and don't use your fingernail unless you want to end up with this little piece jammed up under it, which is likely to happen. Basically, all I'm going to do is I'm going to reach up under this with the pick, and it's going to be a little difficult to do it sideways on camera. But I'm going to lift up under it with this pick and get it to pull up and then back. And I'm going to turn it sideways so you can see what it looks like. So it was flush and I pulled it down this way, and now it's protruding out. At this point I can swivel the housing out and pull it straight down till this pin clears. At this point I've got the mainspring housing out. And other than possibly cleaning it or lightly oiling it, there's nothing more to do with this for the moment, so I'm going to set it aside. The next thing I need to do is pull the bolt out. And if you go to pull the bolt out and it stops, pull the trigger and kind of tilt the gun up, and the bolt should pop right out. If it doesn't, just wiggle it a little bit. Basically what's happening is the hammer's getting caught up in here. So you know, pull the trigger, kind of wiggle the gun until the hammer comes free and the bolt will slide right out. At this point I have the bolt out and I can clean it, oil it, I can pull the spring off right here. This spring, the recoil spring, comes off. There's one important note. This is probably the most dire warning I've seen in the manual of a gun. There's a pin right here, and you can see the pin and you can see it on the other side right here. There's really no good reason to take this apart to remove this pin unless you want to fully disassemble this assembly for cleaning, which you don't have to do often. This actually stays fairly clean. But if you do remove this pin, you absolutely positively have to make sure it's back in here. The warning is if this pin's not in place, the next time you pull the trigger, the firing pin will come forward with such force that it'll destroy the chamber. Effectively, if you pull the trigger and this pin's not in here, locate a trash can, drop your gun in, it's game over. I've never seen a design like that where a simple mistake like that will result in a destroyed gun. So it's important. Make sure this pin is in there. It will stay in there. It's not coming out. If you remove it to disassemble the firing pin for cleaning, then just make sure you put it back. So I'm going to set this aside. At this point we need to remove the barrel. And the frame here, you can see there's kind of like a ridge right along here. And the barrel sits in that ridge. And it's going to go forward, up, and off. And there's a couple ways to do it. The easiest way to do it is to grab the gun like this, bring your thumb around, put your thumb up against the trigger housing, and then just push forward at the same time you're pushing with a finger at the back. And it should just pop right off. Like that. That little snap, basically it's popped forward. And then it just separates off. Now if you can't get it to pop loose, if you don't have strong enough hands, or if it's overly tight or it's gotten excessively dirty, you can hit it on the back with a rubber mallet. You know, don't want to hit it with a steel hammer because you'll beat it up, but you can hit it with a rubber mallet to pop it off. At this point, it's relatively easy to clean. You have direct access to, you can see the chamber right there, put my hand behind it, you can see the chamber, you can see all the internal components. There's nothing further to disassemble here. You can clean the whole thing, oil it, and the same thing with the frame. Now the frame at this point is fairly well open, so you can clean and oil the hammer a little bit and clean the mechanism inside. So once you've got it apart, it's very easy to get into clean all the different things you need to clean, and this is as far as you need to disassemble it. Okay, so we've got it cleaned, we've got it oiled, we're ready to put it back together. There's a few steps involved, and the first step is relatively easy. You take this whole barrel assembly, it's kind of like the upper on an AR, it's an entire assembly, and there's 3 cutouts in it. One at the back, and this is where the hammer goes. This one is the magwell loading area, and this is going to line up with a protrusion on the frame that's actually going to lock it in place, and if I tilt it forward you'll see it kind of recesses back in. And that's what's going to retain the 2 pieces together when we get it reassembled. Basically, all I'm going to do at this point is take the frame and these 2 pieces, and really what I'm mostly focused on lining up is this piece with this cutout. And I just kind of line it up so that the pieces are in alignment. You can see I've got everything kind of lined up. Just roll it forward and drop it on. And notice it went on with no force. It just kind of fell in place. The gap is nice and even. And now the next step is to finish installing this component by pushing it backwards. And as I do that, you'll see it kind of now protrudes a little bit at the back right there. And you can see that it overlaps a little. We get a little bit of light on this so that you can see it. And that'll show you that you have the 2 components properly reassembled. So at this point we can now move on to the next step. Now to install the bolt, the hammer has to be in the down position, which it is at this point because I was able to put the 2 pieces together without turning anything upside down. So if you look down in there, you don't see the hammer at all. Now it's very possible that if you had to turn it upside down, if you had a little trouble with it, that the hammer may be in the wrong position. For example, the hammer may be in the fire position. And that will obstruct the bolt and cause you a little problem. Well, that's easy to fix. All you do is put the gun with the muzzle up, pull the trigger, and then just slap it. And when you do that, the hammer will fall down. Now in this case the hammer didn't go all the way down, and we do want the hammer all the way down. So I'm just going to pull the trigger and reach in there with a finger, a pick, whatever, and push the hammer the rest of the way down. It'll go easily. Let go of the trigger, and now we're ready to install the bolt. To install the bolt with the hammer down, I simply take the bolt, slide it in position, and it goes all the way in relatively easily. So the next step is we have to get the hammer into the fired position. And to do that, we're going to pull the trigger, put it muzzle down, and just slap it. And you should hear a little tink if the trigger wasn't already in the fire position. You'll hear a little metallic clink as it clicks forward. And then, I'll get a little light in here, I'll show you what the hammer looks like. And you'll see that the hammer, which is right there, I can turn this just right, the hammer, which is right here, is forward. It's very difficult to get light in there and get the pick in there at the same time. There you go. So you can see the hammer is forward. And this little black rod that's hanging down there, That's usually what produces all the nightmares, and we'll deal with that in a second. The big key is, you notice the end of it is free, it's not hung up on anything. So the next step is we let off the trigger, and we need to install the mainspring. And the way this thing works, it's going to go into the gun basically like this. And this rod is going to protrude up through, from the bottom up through this hole. And in order to put it in there, what we're going to do is bring the gun a little bit towards level, and I'm going to grab this in my hand and I'm going to use my index finger just pressed up against the arc of it to hold it in an upright position. I'm going to set the hook in down low and guide this up into that hole and then snap it into position. At this point, this is free to pivot. We'll keep it pivoted out away from the gun, and now tilt the gun muzzle up. And you probably heard a little metallic clink, and that was that little arm falling forward. And when that arm fell forward, there was actually a cutout right up in here that's hard to see. You can see a little bit of a groove there. It's going to slide right into that groove and lock into place. And I can turn a little bit and you can see there's a nice groove in there. So by tilting it in this position, bring it up, and I can tell if it's going to work right or not if there's tension. You see how it goes in so far, it goes in easy, and then when I try to go any further it gives me a hard time? That's good. That means that that arm slid into position and it's springy. It's not hard and rigid and totally blocked, but it's springy. At this point, once I would just push it in all the way and hold it, and then slide this arm up and back into place. And in the moment of truth, if you did it right, the gun will cycle, the gun will fire, and the gun will cycle. So effectively what I did in that 16-second clip was just this, step by step. And the key is knowing the tricks and knowing exactly where to position the hammer. So it needs to be in the cocked position to put the bolt in. It needs to be in the fire position to put the mainspring housing in, and then you tilt slightly back to get that little arm out of the way and lock it in place. Okay, so one of the things you might be curious about is why is this procedure so easy to use and a little bit on the foolproof side? Let me tell you how I arrived at it. See, I've got this big hammer. No, just kidding. What I did is I took the owner's manual and I took each step in the owner's manual and looked at the step, went through that step, and looked to see where could this step go wrong. In the real world, if I'm not in a lab, somebody that's handled one of these things 1,000 times, how could this screw up on me? And then figured out, okay, knowing that, what can I do to make it where it's foolproof? So I did that for each individual step. It took me about between 15 minutes and a half hour to go through that process. And then I did it dry run, slow, step by step, make sure it's right. And then I went for speed. The first time I did it for speed, it took me about 42 seconds. I did it a couple more times and it was down to that 16 seconds, and I'm pretty much able to sustain that. Now I don't suggest that you reassemble yours that fast. That wasn't the goal of it. The goal was just to show that it can be done, that there's no good reason not to buy one of these things, and don't let the the internet terrors of how difficult these are to reassemble scare you away. Look at the procedure, master the procedure, and really just enjoy the gun. They're great little guns. So if you like our videos, please give us a thumbs up, share, subscribe, check us out on Facebook, and have a great day. Thank you.